continuing from Minister Payat's statements, we understand that infrastructure is vital and extremely important in order for the interconnection of the broader region and the diversification of energy supplies of our region and to achieve, as we said, independence of our energy systems. This requires funding, and this is the topic of our next panel. How can we mobilize energy investments in Southeast Europe? And we have the honor to have with us today Mr. PAVLOS MYLONAS, the CEO of National Bank of Greece.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the organizers, CHAE and the American Hellenic Chamber of Commerce, for the one more time inviting me to speak to what has become a landmark conference, the top energy conference in Greece by far. And so I would like to congratulate both Costa and Nico for their great work. Now, as I said, I've come every year to speak, and it's always been easy to come up with remarks because things change so rapidly from year to year. Many positive developments and also many scary surprises in terms of how we see the climate changing. So let me begin first, before I go to financing, a little bit on where I see things standing. First, what's very positive is that the level of public attention has been elevated unfortunately, by the frequency and ferocity of environmental disasters. Too numerous to enumerate, and certainly we in Greece have had more than our fair share. Thessaly, Rhodes, Evros, and several fires in Attiki. These help focus the mind of everyone, including politicians and hopefully all us private individuals and enterprises as well. Now, we've had some short-term wins on energy security. The switch away from Russian gas from 20% of EU energy consumption in 2020 is down to 8% currently. And already now, 2.5 months before winter, we have already achieved 90% storage capacity. So the short term looks quite positive there. Also on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, renewable capacity globally has increased very rapidly, and it was up 50% just in 2023. So very good news. However, the world is behind schedule in meeting its stated goal of the Paris Agreement of limiting the increase in the world temperature to only 1.5% above pre-industrial levels. And in this regard, the EU has responded by raising its transition targets with the REPowerEU initiative. Key changes are that by 2030, 45% of energy consumption from renewables must come from renewables, raising the target from 40%, and the current level is now 25%, so quite an ambitious target. The EU has also raised the target for energy savings to be 12% of total energy consumption by 2030, up from 9%. Now, these climate goals create what I call a difficult trilemma. We need to simultaneously decarbonize. This requires huge investments, and it raises the question, who bears the burden, especially when countries have already high levels of debt coming out of COVID. The second target is energy security. This also requires much spending and raises the question of who bears the burden. And the third goal or challenge is affordability. In market economies, prices are the key mechanism for incentivizing change. And the question again is, who will bear the burden, especially when you look at more vulnerable parts of society. Just some sobering numbers, CO2 permits cost in 2020, 25 euros per ton, in 2021, 53 euros per ton, and in 2023, 85 euros per ton. That number is only going to go up, and someone will bear the burden. Now let me turn to Greece. The situation in Greece is of interest to us because we are mostly Greeks, but it's also a country that's ahead of the curve and provides many lessons for those who follow. We in Greece have made great strides in renewables. Currently, wind and solar capacity of 12 gigawatts covers almost one half of electricity production versus the ratio in Europe, the similar ratio in Europe being 27%, so double. Greece is also a key player in EU energy security. The LNG terminals supply not only Greece, but also our neighbors, provide them access to alternatives to Russian gas, but also to alternatives to dirtier fossil fuels. We at NBG are very proud of the Alexandroupolis LNG terminal, where we provided difficult financial structuring as well as significant financing. We should expect many more positive developments coming out of Greece in the near future. The government's National Climate and Energy Plan is ambitious, more so than most similar plans in the EU countries, with a target of 77% of electricity consumption produced by renewables by 2030 and a phase out of fossil fuels by 2028. Meeting these targets will require an approximate doubling of wind and solar capacity by 2030. However, the current pipeline for renewables, mostly comprising photovoltaic projects, suggests that it's doable. The high potential for offshore wind farms would ease further the meeting of these targets. That's the good news. Now let me turn to bad news. The rapid growth of renewables has revealed bottlenecks to efficient transition. This is mostly due to the stochasticness that is created by renewables. What do I mean by this term? Quite simply, the sun doesn't shine at night and the wind doesn't always blow. This leads to negative prices sometimes on the grid, especially at midday, or the non-purchase of renewable energy. This requires two solutions. One is grid expansion and interconnectivity so that renewables can be used to the greatest extent possible when they are available. The recent jump in prices in Greece and in Eastern Europe arising from Ukraine suddenly turning to be a next demander of energy versus a supplier is a case in point of why we need better interconnectivity. Eastern Europe faced higher prices, Western Europe did not. The other requirement is storage. Here we have had significant technological advancements. There'll be more, but infrastructure needs to be in place to store renewable energy when it's produced more than it's demanded. This is either batteries or pumped hydro to the extent that it's available. It is very, very important, let me underline this, to solve this price uncertainty. It will hold back investments in renewables and be an important obstacle to banks providing financing. It creates uncertainty to cash flows, and when there's uncertainty to cash flows, that makes investments less bankable. There are also discussions in Europe, early discussions, on how to accommodate stochasticness in the pricing mechanism. The marginal pricing model has its limits. It needs to take into adjustments. It needs to take into adjustments on this stochasticness created by renewables. Now, the other important constraint to transition is how to expand electrification of the energy mix to transportation. It is quite clear how we're going to do it in terms of producing energy for production. It's not so clear how we'll do it for transportation. This requires electric cars, electric trucks, maybe electric boats, and then there's the very difficult question of how to expand it to the home, to replace heating. This is a burden. This will be a burden on someone's budget, and the question is who. It takes a lot of money to switch everyone's housing to more efficient green energy, and the question then is who does it. Now let me turn to financing. Needs and sources. The new national plan, energy plan for Greece, is estimated to cost 94 billion by 2030. Our GDP in Greece is just over 200, so that gives you the order of magnitude. About half is targeted for transportation, which you mentioned as one of the most difficult issues. Electric vehicles and fleet renewal. 40% is energy production, grid expansion, and storage, and 15% is for household transition, as this has been delayed a bit in view of its very significant costs. Now, the financial sector is expected to finance about a third. That's about 30 billion over 6 years. Do the math, that's about 5 billion per year. This is about a fourfold increase versus what we currently, as Greek banks, provide for energy financing per year. So it's a major step up. Now, the good news is that Greek banks have the capital, they have the liquidity to provide such funding. However, as I mentioned earlier, financing requires a stable institutional framework with a clear view of possible constraints on project returns stretching out decades. That's the lifetime of these energy projects. We need a clear view going out decades. We also need minimum uncertainty and volatility on energy prices. This goes back to the point on infrastructure, on grid expansion, storage, and of course the price mechanism. Another requirement for the provision of financing is strong project finance structuring teams, which becomes even more important in view of the new uncertainties in these projects, such as the period of zero prices or cutoffs to purchases from the grid. You can imagine what sort of discussions we have in credit committees when these issues arise. But all problems have solutions, and at NBG, we pride ourselves in our ability to do so and find solutions, and I think the market acknowledges our lead in this area. To give you one example of NBG's innovative capabilities, we have recently launched a new product which aims to make more projects bankable in the world of market-set energy prices, which has replaced the world of fixed tariffs. This product offers fixed rates based on forward markets going out even to 10 years, provided either to consumers of energy or to producers of energy. This is very important as it's mentioned earlier, it will reduce the uncertainty of project cash flows and make them bankable. To conclude, there are clearly many challenges to achieving the desired energy transition. However, these challenges also provide opportunities. As a country, to become a net exporter of energy, for enterprises to be part of this transition story, and for banks, of course, to provide the financing. At NBG, we already are a leader in energy business financing, and we like to call ourselves the country's energy bank, η Τράπεζα Ενέργειας. And we plan to put a lot of focus on this area in the future. And with that, I would like to conclude. Thank you very much.